They say a man only learns what truly matters when he stands in front of a grave with something left to say. The rain had started before dawn and never stopped. By noon, the gray sky hung low over the cemetery like a heavy blanket, muting every color except the white roses in my hand. Water dripped from the black umbrella above me, running down the polished marble headstone in front of me. Claire Bennett. The letters were carved deep and sharp. Permanent. Final. Cold. I stared at her name for a long time, longer than I intended. Maybe because if I kept looking at it, I didn't have to look at the empty space around me. I didn't have to think about the silence. I didn't have to remember that this was the 4th year without her. For years since I heard her laugh. For years since she looked at me with those impossible blue eyes and told me I wasn't nearly as frightening as I wanted people to believe. For years since she disappeared from my life and left a wound no amount of money could fix. I lowered myself slowly onto the wet bench beside the memorial. The expensive wool coat I wore soaked through almost immediately, but I didn't care. I hadn't cared about much in a long time. Somewhere behind me, my security team waited at a respectful distance. They always did. The city still feared my name. Politicians still answered my calls. Newspapers still speculated about my wealth. Business rivals still watched every move I made. To the outside world, Adrian Moretti had everything. Power, influence, success, the kind of life people spent decades chasing. But none of those people were standing here. None of them knew the truth. None of them knew that every Sunday for the last 4 years, I came to this place carrying flowers for a woman who wasn't even buried beneath the stone. My fingers tightened around the roses. That was the part nobody knew. There was no body, no funeral, no goodbye, just a disappearance that swallowed her whole and left questions nobody could answer. The memorial had been my mother's idea. A place to mourn, a place to let go. I almost laughed every time I thought about it. Let go. As if grief worked that way. As if love worked that way. A cold gust of wind swept across the cemetery. The roses trembled in my hand. I stood and placed them carefully at the base of the stone. White roses. Her favorite. She once told me they reminded her that beauty didn't need attention to exist. I didn't understand what she meant back then. I understood now. Too late. Everything important in my life seemed to arrive too late. I brushed rainwater from the marble and noticed something tucked beneath the flowers already there. A photograph. My heartbeat slowed, then stopped. It was old, creased at the corners. Anonymous. No note. No explanation. Just a photograph. My hand shook as I picked it up. The image showed a woman standing beside a river somewhere I didn't recognize. Her face was turned partially away from the camera. But I knew that posture. I knew that hair. I knew that smile. The world around me disappeared. The rain. The wind. The cemetery. Everything. Because the woman in the photograph was Claire Bennett. And Claire Bennett was supposed to be gone. For a moment, I forgot how to breathe. The photograph felt heavier than paper should have felt. Rainwater ran down my fingers and across the image, but I could still see her clearly enough. Claire stood beside a narrow river lined with tall trees dressed in autumn colors. Gold, orange, red. The kind of peaceful landscape she used to stop and admire when everyone else was in a hurry. My eyes searched every detail. The gray sweater, the loose hair moving in the wind, the faint smile on her face. Not the forced smile she used around strangers. The real one. The smile that always reached her eyes. My chest tightened. For years of unanswered questions. For years of believing I would never see her face again. And now someone had placed this photograph on her memorial without a single explanation. I turned the image over. Blank. No writing. No date. Nothing. Just silence. The same silence that had haunted me since the day she vanished. Behind me, I heard footsteps approaching through the wet grass. Vincent stopped several feet away. He had been my head of security for nearly a decade, and one of the few people I trusted completely. He rarely looked surprised. Today was different. "Boss?" he asked quietly. I handed him the photograph. He studied it for several seconds. His expression changed immediately. Where did this come from? It was here when I arrived. He looked back toward the cemetery entrance. Nobody reported anyone approaching the memorial. Then somebody got past them. The thought should have made me angry. Instead, it gave me something I had not felt in years. Hope. Dangerous hope. The kind that could destroy a man if he allowed it to grow unchecked. Vincent stared at the photograph again. It could be old. I nodded. It could. It could be someone who looks like her. I nodded again. It could. Neither of us believed it. There were too many details. Too many things only I would recognize. The small silver bracelet on her wrist. The one I gave her on her 26th birthday. The way she tilted her head when she was lost in thought. The tiny scar above her left eyebrow from a bicycle accident when she was 13. Nobody else would notice those things. I noticed all of them. Because I had spent years memorizing her face. Vincent exhaled slowly. What do you want me to do? I looked down at the photograph one more time. Rain fell harder around us. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled across the sky. For years ago, I would have ordered an army of investigators to tear apart every city on the East Coast searching for answers. For years ago, I believed every problem could be solved through force, money, or influence. Claire had hated that about me. Maybe that was why I hesitated now. Maybe that was why I looked at her smile and felt something deeper than desperation. I felt responsibility. Find out where this picture was taken, I said. Nothing else. No assumptions. No shortcuts. Just the truth. Vincent nodded. And if it is her? My eyes remained fixed on the image. On the woman I had loved. On the woman I had lost. On the woman who might still be alive. Then for the first time in 4 years, I said softly, I finally know where to start. 3 days passed without answers. 3 days of staring at my phone every time it vibrated. 3 days of pretending I could focus on meetings, contracts, and decisions that once controlled my entire world. None of it mattered. Every conversation sounded distant. Every office felt empty. Every hour stretched longer than the one before it. On the 4th morning, Vincent walked into my office carrying a thin black folder. The sight of it made my pulse quicken. He placed it on the desk without speaking. Rain tapped softly against the floor-to-ceiling windows behind me. New York disappeared beneath low clouds. I opened the folder. Inside was a map. Several photographs. A report no longer than 3 pages. My eyes moved directly to the first line. Vermont. The photograph had been taken in Vermont. A small town near the Connecticut River. Population under 4,000. Quiet streets. Local businesses. Hiking trails. The kind of place Claire would have loved. The kind of place nobody would ever think to search. I continued reading. The image itself was recent. Less than 6 months old according to the analysis. My hand froze on the paper. 6 months. Not 4 years. Not some forgotten memory buried in a box. 6 months. Claire had been standing beside that river 6 months ago. Alive. Breathing. Smiling. I leaned back slowly in my chair. The room felt smaller. For years I had imagined every possible ending. I imagined she had left the country. I imagined she had started a family somewhere. I imagined she hated me. I imagined she was gone forever. But I never imagined this feeling. The strange combination of hope and fear twisting together inside my chest. Because if Claire was alive, then another question immediately followed. Why had she never contacted me? Vincent sat across from the desk. There is more. I looked up. He slid another photograph toward me. This one was taken outside a bookstore. Claire stood near the entrance holding a paper coffee cup. She wore a dark coat and a knitted scarf. Her hair was slightly shorter than before. Her smile softer. Older somehow. Wiser. But unmistakably her. My throat tightened. I remembered buying coffee for her on cold mornings. I remembered how she always complained it was too hot before taking a sip anyway. Tiny memories. Ordinary memories. The kind that become priceless after someone leaves. How long have you had this? I asked. Since last night. And nobody told me. I wanted confirmation before giving you hope. Hope. The word lingered in the air between us. Dangerous. Powerful. Necessary. I stood and walked toward the window. Traffic moved slowly 20 stories below. Thousands of people living their lives. Falling in love. Losing people. Finding them again. For 4 years I had convinced myself that moving forward was the only option. Now the future I built suddenly felt fragile. Because somewhere in a quiet Vermont town, Claire Bennett might be waking up this morning completely unaware that her past had finally found a trail leading straight to her door. Then Vincent spoke again. There is one thing that does not make sense. I turned toward him. He pointed at the second photograph. Look closer. My eyes narrowed. Standing in the bookstore window behind Claire was a handwritten sign. 3 simple words. And the moment I read them, every certainty I had vanished. Because the sign said, Welcome home, Emily. Emily. I read the name again. Then a third time. The letters did not change. The bookstore window still welcomed someone named Emily home. Not Claire. Not Bennett. Emily. I stared at the photograph until the edges blurred. For 4 years I had imagined finding answers. I never considered finding a different name. Vincent remained silent. He knew me well enough to understand what was happening inside my head. If Claire was alive, then she had not simply disappeared. She had become someone else. Or at least she wanted the world to believe she had. I picked up the photograph and studied every detail again. The coffee cup, the bookstore, the river, the relaxed expression on her face. She did not look afraid. She did not look trapped. She looked peaceful. The realization hit harder than I expected. Peaceful. It was a word I had never associated with our life together. We had moments of happiness. We had laughter. We had long walks through Central Park and quiet dinners that stretched past midnight. But peace was different. Peace was stability. Peace was safety. Peace was something I had never truly known how to give her. I walked back to my desk and opened the drawer where I kept the last photograph we ever took together. Claire stood beside me on a rooftop overlooking Manhattan. The city lights reflected in her eyes. She was smiling at the camera. I was looking at her. Back then I thought love was enough. I thought providing everything she could ever want was enough. I thought protecting her meant controlling every variable around her. Claire used to tell me that people were not projects. They were not problems to solve. At the time I smiled and changed the subject. Now her words echoed through the office like a lesson I had learned years too late. Vincent finally spoke. What do you want to do? I looked at the two photographs side by side. The woman I remembered. The woman she had become. For years separated them. For years of birthdays. Holidays. Ordinary mornings. Entire chapters of her life that existed without me. Nothing, I said quietly. Vincent frowned. Nothing. Not yet. The answer surprised even me. The old Adrian would already be on a plane. The old Adrian would arrive unannounced and demand answers. The old Adrian would make his presence impossible to ignore. But that version of me was part of the reason Claire left. If I had truly learned anything from losing her, it was this. Some doors opened only when they were approached gently. I slid the photographs back into the folder. Outside, the rain had finally stopped. A thin ray of sunlight broke through the clouds and reflected against the glass towers across the city. For the first time in years, the future felt uncertain again. Not empty, not hopeless, just uncertain. Then my phone buzzed on the desk. A new message from Vincent's investigation team. One sentence, one discovery. I opened it and felt my heart skip. Emily Carter volunteers every Thursday afternoon at the Maple River Community Center. Tomorrow was Thursday. I did not sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face in the photograph. Every time I opened them, I saw the clock moving closer to morning. By 6 o'clock, I was standing beside the window of my penthouse watching the city wake beneath a pale gray sky. New York moved the same way it always had. Taxis filled the streets. Steam rose from the sidewalks. People hurried toward offices and meetings and lives that made sense. Mine no longer did. At 8:30, I was on a private flight headed north. Not because I intended to confront her. Not because I had some grand plan. I simply needed to see the place where she had chosen to build a new life. The flight lasted less than 2 hours. The drive from the small regional airport took another 40 minutes. Vermont looked exactly the way Claire always described it when she talked about escaping the city. Rolling hills, endless trees, quiet roads that curved through small towns where people actually knew their neighbors. Places where nobody cared about power or status or headlines. Places where a person could disappear if they wanted to. Maple River was smaller than I expected. A few brick buildings, a diner, a bookstore, a church with a white steeple rising above the rooftops. It felt like a town preserved inside a snow globe, untouched by the noise of the world. I parked across the street from the community center shortly before noon. The building itself was simple. Red brick, white trim, a small playground behind it. Nothing remarkable. Yet my heart pounded harder than it ever had during the most important moments of my career. Because she was somewhere inside. For years had led to this parking space. This sidewalk. This ordinary Thursday afternoon. I remained in the car. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. Children ran in and out of the center carrying backpacks and art supplies. Volunteers greeted one another with easy smiles. The scene felt warm, genuine, the kind of environment Claire had always loved. Then the front door opened. My breath caught. A woman stepped outside carrying a cardboard box filled with books. The world seemed to slow. Her hair was a little shorter now. The sunlight caught strands of gold I did not remember noticing before. She wore jeans, a cream-colored sweater, and comfortable sneakers. Nothing expensive, nothing dramatic. Just Claire. Or Emily. Or whatever name she called herself now. She laughed at something an older woman said beside her. The sound did not reach me through the closed windows, but I could see it. I could see happiness. Real happiness. The kind that transformed her entire face. My chest tightened unexpectedly. Not because I found her. Because she looked better without me. Healthier. Lighter. As if the weight she carried for years had finally disappeared. Claire adjusted the box in her arms and turned slightly toward the street. For one terrifying second, I thought she might see me. Instead, she continued walking toward a nearby bench where several children waited for her. They greeted her enthusiastically. She greeted every single one by name. I watched from across the street, unable to move, unable to speak. Because after 4 years of searching for answers, I had finally found her. And for the first time since she disappeared, I was no longer sure I deserved to be part of her story. I stayed in Maple River for 3 days without speaking to her. 3 days of watching from a distance and learning the shape of the life she had built. Every morning she arrived at the community center before 8. Every afternoon she helped children with reading programs, art projects, and homework. Every evening she walked home carrying a canvas tote bag filled with books. It was an ordinary life. The kind of life most people would overlook. Claire had once told me that ordinary was underrated. Back then I laughed because I could not imagine wanting anything ordinary. Standing in Vermont 4 years later, I finally understood. On the 4th day, I found myself sitting alone in the corner of a small diner across the street from the bookstore. The coffee had gone cold 20 minutes earlier. Outside, golden leaves drifted across the sidewalk in the afternoon breeze. The town moved at its own pace. Nobody rushed. Nobody seemed concerned about what came next. It felt like another world. The bell above the diner's entrance chimed softly. I glanced up automatically. Then everything inside me stopped. Claire walked in. She was alone. My first instinct was to stand. My second was to leave. Instead, I remained frozen in the booth while she approached the counter. She ordered coffee and smiled at the waitress. The waitress greeted her by name. Emily. The name landed harder this time. Not because it was unfamiliar. Because she responded to it naturally. Comfortably. As if it truly belonged to her now. I watched her take a seat near the window. 20 feet separated us. 20 feet after 4 years. Close enough to see the tiny freckles near her cheekbones. Close enough to notice the silver bracelet still resting on her wrist. The same bracelet I gave her years ago. My throat tightened. She opened a notebook and began writing. Occasionally, she paused to stare outside at the passing leaves before returning to the page. It was such a Claire thing to do that I almost smiled. Then she looked up. Our eyes met. The world disappeared. The sounds of the diner faded. The conversations vanished. There was only her. For 1 second I saw recognition. Then disbelief. Her coffee cup stopped halfway to the table. Her expression drained of color. Neither of us moved. For years collapsed into a single moment. Every goodbye we never said. Every question left unanswered. Every memory still unfinished. I slowly stood from the booth. My heart pounded so hard it hurt. Claire remained seated. Her eyes never left mine. I expected anger. I expected tears. I expected her to walk away. Instead, she looked at me with something far more difficult to face. Distance. The distance of someone who had spent years learning how to live without you. Finally, she placed the coffee cup down. Her voice was quiet, barely above a whisper. Yet I heard every word. Adrian. It was the first time she had spoken my name in 4 years. And somehow it sounded exactly the same. Hearing my name in her voice felt like stepping into a memory I had spent years trying to survive. Neither of us moved. The waitress glanced between us, sensing something she could not understand, then quietly walked away. Claire looked down first. Not out of fear. Not out of weakness. Simply because she had learned how to protect her peace. I recognized it immediately. For years ago, she would have demanded answers. Today, she seemed to be deciding whether the conversation was worth having at all. That realization hurt more than I expected. Slowly, she closed her notebook. Her fingers rested on the cover for a moment before she looked back at me. How did you find me? She asked. Her voice was calm. Too calm. I sat across from her without being invited. A photograph. She blinked once. A small reaction. The first crack in her composure. A photograph? Someone left it at your memorial. The word lingered between us. Memorial. I watched her eyes soften with sadness. Not surprise. Sadness. As though she already knew such a place existed. Outside, a pickup truck rolled slowly down the street. Leaves drifted across the sidewalk. The town continued moving while my entire world balanced on every word she spoke. I never wanted that, she said quietly. I never wanted people mourning me. Then why disappear? The question escaped before I could stop it. Years of confusion compressed into 4 simple words. Claire looked out the window. For several seconds, she said nothing. Because staying was destroying me. The honesty landed harder than any accusation could have. I lowered my eyes. There was no anger in her voice. No bitterness. Just truth. And truth was difficult because it did not leave room for excuses. I know, I said. She looked surprised. You know? I nodded slowly. Not then. But now, yes. For the first time since sitting down, she studied me carefully, as though comparing the man she remembered with the one sitting across from her. I wondered what she saw. More gray in my hair. More lines around my eyes. A little less certainty. A little more regret. You used to think you could fix everything, she said. I smiled sadly. I remember. You used to think love meant solving problems. I remember that too. A faint smile touched the corner of her lips before disappearing. It was the closest thing to warmth I had seen since arriving in Vermont. The silence that followed felt different. Less hostile. Less guarded. Then the bell above the diner door rang. Several children rushed inside carrying backpacks and laughing loudly. Claire immediately turned toward them. Every face brightened when they saw her. They waved enthusiastically. She waved back. One little girl ran over and handed her a drawing folded in half. Claire thanked her like it was the greatest gift in the world. Watching her, I finally understood something that had taken me 4 years to learn. Claire had not been hiding. She had been healing. She had built a life filled with simple things that mattered. People who knew her. Children who trusted her. A community that loved her. And for the first time, I found myself asking a question I never expected. If she had truly found happiness here, what right did I have to take any of it away? Then Claire unfolded the drawing. Her expression changed instantly. She stared at the paper. Then she looked toward the diner entrance. And whatever she saw made all the color leave her face. My eyes followed hers toward the entrance. A man had just stepped inside. Mid-30s. Tall. Broad shoulders. Nothing threatening about him. Nothing remarkable either. He wore a worn denim jacket and carried a stack of books under one arm. Yet the moment Claire saw him, something changed. Not fear. Not exactly. More like surprise. The kind that arrives when 2 separate parts of your life suddenly collide. The man spotted her immediately. His expression brightened. Then he noticed me sitting across from her. The smile faded slightly. Confusion replaced it. He walked toward our table. The children who had entered with him greeted him enthusiastically as they passed. He greeted every one of them by name. Another person who belonged here. Another person woven into the life Claire had built. Emily, he asked gently. Claire folded the drawing and set it beside her coffee. It is okay, Daniel. Daniel. The name settled heavily in my chest for reasons I could not explain. He glanced at me again. Not hostile. Not suspicious. Simply curious. Everything all right? He asked. Claire hesitated. The pause lasted only a second, but I noticed it. So did he. This is Adrian, she said quietly. Someone from my past. Someone from my past. Not someone she loved. Not someone important. Just someone from her past. The words stung more than they should have. Daniel extended his hand politely. I shook it. His grip was firm. Comfortable. The grip of a man who had nothing to prove. Nice to meet you, he said. I wish I could say the same. The thought crossed my mind. Thankfully, I kept it there. Claire shot me a look that instantly reminded me why she used to get frustrated with me. Even now she could read my expressions too easily. Daniel set the books on the table. The reading program starts in 15 minutes. Claire nodded. I will be there. He smiled at her. A simple smile. Familiar. Warm. Then he left. I watched him cross the diner and disappear through the door. Only after he was gone did I realize how tightly I had been gripping my coffee cup. Claire noticed too. Do not, she said. Do not what? Do not turn him into a problem. I almost laughed. Some things never changed. I was not planning to. Good. Her voice softened slightly. Because he is a good person. I looked down at the folded drawing. Someone important? Claire followed my gaze toward the door. A small smile appeared. Genuine. Effortless. The kind of smile she used to save for moments when she felt completely at ease. Very important. The answer landed like a stone in my stomach. For years I imagined finding Claire exactly as I left her. Waiting. Healing perhaps. But unchanged. Instead, I was discovering something far more difficult. Time had continued without me. She had friendships, responsibilities, people she cared about, an entire world that existed beyond my memory of her. Claire stood and picked up her notebook. I need to go. I rose too. Will I see you again? She looked at me for a long moment. The afternoon sunlight caught her eyes. The same eyes I had searched for in 1,000 dreams. That depends, she said softly. Are you here because you found me, Adrian? Or because you finally found yourself? Her question followed me long after she left the diner. I watched her cross the street toward the community center, greeting people along the way as if she had known them her entire life. Maybe she had. For years was long enough to build roots. Long enough to become someone new. I remained standing beside the window until she disappeared inside. Then I sat back down and stared at the empty chair across from me. Are you here because you found me, Adrian? Or because you finally found yourself? The truth was I did not know. For years I convinced myself that finding Claire would fix everything. That somehow seeing her again would close the wound I carried every day. But nothing about this reunion looked the way I imagined. She was not waiting for me. She was not lost. She was not broken. She was living a life that seemed complete without my presence. That realization stayed with me as I walked through Maple River that evening. The town glowed beneath strings of lights hanging between storefronts. Families filled the sidewalks. Couples carried grocery bags. Someone played acoustic guitar outside a cafe. It felt impossibly normal. The kind of normal life Claire always wanted. The kind I never understood. My phone buzzed. Vincent. I almost ignored it. Everything all right? He asked. I looked across the street toward the bookstore. Claire was inside arranging books on a display table. Through the glass, she looked peaceful. Focused. Home. I found her, I said quietly. Vincent was silent for a moment. And I laughed softly. It surprised both of us. And she is doing better than I am. Another pause. What happens now? I watched Claire help an elderly customer reach a book from a high shelf. The customer smiled. Claire smiled back. Such a simple moment. Yet it carried more warmth than most of my entire year. I do not know, I admitted. Maybe for once I stopped deciding what happens next. After ending the call, I continued walking. Without realizing it, my feet carried me toward the river from the photograph. The water moved gently beneath the fading sunlight. Leaves floated across the surface. Nearby, a wooden bench overlooked the shoreline. I sat down. For the first time in years, I allowed myself to remember the last night before Claire disappeared. Not the arguments. Not the mistakes. The quieter moments. The way she used to leave notes inside books because she knew I would eventually find them. The way she always stopped to watch sunsets even when she was late. The way she believed people could change if they truly wanted to. Back then I thought change was weakness. Now it felt like the only thing that mattered. A cool breeze drifted across the water. I closed my eyes. Then I heard footsteps approaching. When I looked up, Daniel was standing a few feet away. His hands rested inside the pockets of his jacket. His expression was calm, thoughtful, like a man who had spent time deciding whether to have a conversation. Mind if I sit? He asked. Something told me the answer to that question was about to change everything. Daniel lowered himself onto the bench beside me. For a few moments, neither of us spoke. The river moved quietly in front of us, carrying fallen leaves downstream. The last light of day reflected across the water in thin ribbons of gold. It was the kind of view Claire would have stopped to admire. Eventually, Daniel smiled faintly. She always comes here when she needs to think. I looked toward the river. That does not surprise me. He nodded as if confirming something to himself. You know, when she first arrived, she barely spoke to anyone. My attention shifted immediately. Daniel rested his forearms on his knees. People assumed she was shy. She let them believe that. The truth was different. A cool breeze stirred the trees above us. What was the truth? I asked. He watched the water for a long moment before answering. She looked like someone carrying a house full of memories she could not put down. The words landed harder than he could possibly know. Because I had helped build those memories. I had helped create that weight. Daniel continued. She never talked much about New York. Never talked about her old life. Whenever someone asked, she would smile and change the subject. I swallowed. Did she ever mention me? Daniel laughed softly. Not by name. Somehow that hurt. But he glanced at me. She mentioned a man once. Someone she loved very much. Someone she could not stay with. The river suddenly seemed much louder. And what did she say? Daniel leaned back against the bench. She said loving someone is not always enough. Sometimes you lose yourself trying to carry another person's storms. I closed my eyes briefly. Claire had always known how to explain complicated emotions with simple words. That was one of the things I loved most about her. Daniel studied me carefully. She changed after a while. How? She started laughing again. His smile returned. Started volunteering. Started helping kids. Started making friends. It took time, but she built something good here. I nodded slowly, because I had seen it with my own eyes. The bookstore, the community center, the people who greeted her on every street. The version of Claire sitting here in Vermont looked lighter than the woman I remembered. Happier. Daniel stood. I should get going. I rose as well. For a moment, we simply looked at one another. Two men connected by the same woman in completely different ways. Then he said something unexpected. She was worried you would come someday. My chest tightened. Worried, not afraid. He shook his head. Just worried that seeing you again would reopen old wounds she worked very hard to heal. I looked toward the river. I never wanted that. I believe you. Daniel slipped his hands into his jacket pockets. The question is whether she believes it. With that, he started walking back toward town. I remained beside the river long after he disappeared. The sky darkened. The temperature dropped. Lights began appearing in windows across Maple River. One by one. Warm and welcoming. Then my phone vibrated. A message from an unknown number. My heartbeat quickened as I opened it. There were only 6 words. Meet me tomorrow. 10 o'clock. The bookstore. No signature was necessary. The next morning felt longer than any day I could remember. 10 o'clock had never seemed so far away. I arrived at the bookstore 15 minutes early and spent every one of those minutes pretending to study the titles displayed in the front window. The truth was I could not focus on a single word. My attention kept drifting to the reflection in the glass, to the street behind me, to every passing car, to every opening door. At exactly 10 o'clock, Claire appeared. She stepped out from a side entrance carrying 2 cups of coffee. The sight caught me off guard. For a second I simply stared. Then she walked toward me and held one out. You still take it black? She asked. I accepted the cup slowly. You remembered. A faint smile touched her lips. Some things are difficult to forget. We stood there awkwardly for a moment. 2 people connected by 1,000 memories and separated by 4 years of silence. Finally, she motioned toward a small park across the street. We walked there together. The morning air carried the scent of pine and fallen leaves. A few people waved as we passed. Claire greeted each of them by name. Watching her felt like watching someone move through a life she genuinely belonged to. We sat on a bench overlooking a small pond. Ducks drifted lazily across the water. Children laughed somewhere in the distance. The setting could not have been more different from the world we once shared. Claire wrapped both hands around her coffee cup. I spent a long time wondering what I would say if I ever saw you again. I looked at her, and she laughed softly. I had dozens of speeches prepared. That sounds like you. None of them seem important now. The honesty in her voice made me smile despite myself. For a few moments we sat in comfortable silence. Then she looked at me directly. Why did you really come here? The question deserved more than a convenient answer. I stared at the pond, at the ripples spreading across the surface. At first, I admitted, because I wanted answers. She nodded. And now? I thought carefully before speaking. Now I think I came because I needed to see whether you were happy. Claire blinked. The answer surprised her. It surprised me too. She lowered her eyes. And I smiled gently. You are. Her expression softened. Not dramatically, just enough for me to notice. I worked very hard for that happiness, Adrian. I know. No. She shook her head. I do not think you do. There was no anger in her voice. Only truth. The first year was terrible. I questioned everything. I questioned myself. I questioned whether leaving was the right choice. My chest tightened. Claire. She raised a hand gently. Not to stop me. To finish what she needed to say. Then one day I realized something. I kept waiting for someone else to tell me who I was supposed to be. Her eyes met mine. Clear. Steady. Strong. The moment I stopped waiting was the moment my life finally began. I wanted to respond. I wanted to apologize. I wanted to explain everything I had learned too late. But before I could speak, Claire reached into her bag and removed a small envelope. She stared at it for several seconds before handing it to me. "There is something you need to see." The envelope felt surprisingly light in my hands. Old, worn at the edges, as if it had been opened and closed countless times over the years. Claire watched me quietly while I stared at it. The pond rippled gently behind her. Somewhere nearby, a dog barked and children laughed. Ordinary sounds. Peaceful sounds. Yet my heart was pounding. Slowly, I opened the envelope and pulled out a folded letter. My breath caught the moment I recognized the handwriting. Claire's. I unfolded the paper carefully. The date at the top stopped me cold. For years ago, 3 days after she disappeared. My eyes moved down the page. Adrian, if you are reading this, then something unexpected happened. Because I never planned for you to see these words. I swallowed hard and continued. The letter was not angry. That was the first thing I noticed. It was not filled with blame or accusations. It was filled with honesty. Claire wrote about exhaustion, about feeling lost inside a life that no longer felt like her own, about loving someone deeply while slowly forgetting who she was. Every sentence felt like a mirror held up to mistakes I had spent years avoiding. Then I reached the part that changed everything. I never stopped loving you, Adrian. But I realized one day that I had started disappearing inside our relationship. I kept becoming smaller so your world could stay large. That is not your fault alone. I allowed it. And if I stayed, I would eventually become someone neither of us would recognize. My vision blurred. I lowered the letter for a moment. Claire sat silently across from me. She already knew every word. She had lived them. I forced myself to continue reading. The final page was shorter, simpler. If we are ever meant to meet again, I hope it happens because we both became who we were supposed to be, not because we are trying to return to who we used to be. By the time I reached the signature, my hands were shaking. I folded the letter carefully and placed it back inside the envelope. Neither of us spoke for several seconds. Finally, I looked up. Claire's eyes were bright with emotion she was trying very hard to control. "Why are you showing me this now?" I asked quietly. She smiled sadly. "Because for years I thought you would never understand why I left." A breeze moved across the pond, carrying golden leaves through the air. "And now?" I asked. Claire looked toward the water before turning back to me. "Now I think you finally do." The words settled gently between us. Not as a victory, not as a defeat, simply as truth. For the first time since arriving in Vermont, I felt something unexpected. Not hope, not regret, acceptance. Then Claire reached into her bag once more and pulled out a small silver key attached to a faded blue ribbon. I recognized it instantly. It belonged to the apartment we once shared in Manhattan, the apartment she left behind. Claire held it in her palm for a moment before placing it in my hand. "There is one last thing you do not know," she said softly. The small silver key rested in my palm. For a moment I could not speak. I remembered the apartment instantly. The view of the city skyline. The bookshelf she insisted was too large. The kitchen where she danced while making coffee on Sunday mornings. An entire lifetime compressed into a piece of metal no larger than my thumb. Claire watched me carefully. "I kept it all these years," she said. "Why?" Her smile was soft, almost amused. "Because I was not trying to erase my life, Adrian. I was trying to save it." The answer settled quietly between us. So many years wasted believing she had run away from the past. The truth was much simpler. She had been running toward herself. Claire looked down at the pond. Sunlight shimmered across the water behind her. "The last thing you do not know," she continued, "is that I came back once." I stared at her. "What?" She nodded slowly. "About 2 years ago." My heart stopped. "You came back to New York?" "For 3 days." Every memory inside me scrambled for answers. Why did nobody tell me? Claire laughed gently. "Because I did not tell anyone." I sat speechless. She continued. "I rented a hotel room. I walked through Central Park. I visited places we used to go together." Her eyes drifted toward the horizon. "And I stood across the street from your office for almost an hour." The world seemed to narrow around her words. "You saw me?" She nodded. "You were leaving a meeting." I searched her face. "Why did you not come talk to me?" Claire looked at me with a kindness that somehow hurt more than anger ever could. "Because I realized something important that day." A breeze lifted a strand of hair across her cheek. "I was no longer waiting for you to change." My chest tightened. And that was a good thing. It was freedom. She smiled sadly. "For both of us." Silence followed. Not uncomfortable. Not empty. Just honest. The kind of silence that only exists when two people finally stop arguing with reality. I looked down at the key resting in my hand. What am I supposed to do with this? Claire glanced at it, then back at me. Anything you want. I shook my head. That sounds like a test. She laughed. The real laugh. The one I had missed for years. No, it is the opposite of a test. Her expression softened. For so long we both believed every choice had to lead somewhere. Every conversation had to solve something. Every feeling needed a destination. She gestured toward the key. This does not. I looked at her. Truly looked at her. Not as the woman I lost. Not as the woman I spent years searching for. But as the woman sitting beside me now. Stronger. Happier. Entirely herself. And for the first time, I understood. Loving someone was never about possession. It was never about holding on so tightly that nothing could change. Sometimes love was simply recognizing who a person had become and being grateful you had the chance to know them at all. I stood slowly. Claire stood too. Neither of us spoke. We did not need to. Then I took a step back and smiled. I hope you stay happy, Claire. Her eyes glistened slightly in the afternoon light. I hope you do too, Adrian. I nodded. No promises. No dramatic declarations. No attempts to rewrite the past. Just truth. As I turned to leave, I heard her voice one final time. Adrian. I looked back. She smiled. Warm. Genuine. Peaceful. You finally found yourself. And for the first time in many years, I believed she was right.